just my brother's situation. Um, it's it's so heartbreaking, and my heart just really breaks for the victims. And I'm grateful for the justice system that is in place.
So you're coming out with this new memoir, Becoming Free Indeed. First, let's talk about the title. What does the title mean to you? What are you getting into in this memoir?
Yeah, so in this memoir, I tell the story, Becoming Free Indeed. It's the story of my faith journey. I grew up under some harmful teaching that really threatened to leave me fearful and confused about who Jesus was. And so this is just the story of how I've had to disentangle truth from error on my way to finding freedom. And so it's disentangling has been a hard process, and it definitely takes a lot of time, but I share more raw than I ever have before in this memoir about my journey.
And what about right now felt like the time to release this? What about the point you're at in your journey felt like you were ready to do this?
Well, it's hard to say, like, oh, I'm ready, because
Yeah.
I think it never seems like the right time. But I had been working through all of this for 6 years. And so I think I felt like I was in a better place than I was before. And I also wanted to share my story because I know that these teachings that from Bill Gothard that I followed for so many years are so harmful. And I saw how that really affected my life. And his teachings were based on fear, superstition, manipulation, control. So I really wanted to communicate my story. And I felt like now's the time because I've had time to kind of work through a lot of the things that I was raised with. So I felt strong enough to speak now.
Yeah. And tell me a little bit about how these teachings affected you and how you've managed to do this disentangling process as you've gotten older.
Yeah. So, like I said, all of the fear based teachings really affected my life on a daily basis. It affects everything.
Mhm.
So, I remember multiple times just freaking out because I thought, oh man, I don't know what God expects of me. And Bill Gothard taught that life was a very delicate cause and effect sequence. So, if you follow these principles, then God will bless your life. And if you don't, then your life will be one disaster after another. So that's how I viewed everything. Like, for instance, he would say, if you listen to music with drums in it, then he told a story of a young man who like died in a car accident because of that. So I remember one time I was in the car and we were driving to one of these like Bill Gothard seminars of all things. And a guy in the vehicle turned on music with drums. And I was terrified because I thought,
Mhm.
oh no, we're for sure going to die in a car accident because we're listening to this. So that kind of crippling fear went into every area. And I just thought, man, like I really don't know what God expects of me. I feel like he's always out to get me.
Yeah, and that's got to be difficult. You're growing up with this fear and also on camera. How did that add to this?
Yeah, I think I didn't know anything different because I was basically raised on TV starting when I was 10 years old. And so that played out interesting, like in an interesting way, because uh, being on TV, you have some level of like where you feel like you want to be a little guarded and you're always careful what you say. So I didn't share a lot of that like publicly. I would talk with my parents about some of the fears I was facing. And it was just I feel like it was so, like I said, crippling. It really felt like, oh man, now I have all these fears, but I on TV like I may look one way, but in my heart like I'm wrestling with a lot of this. And so it was a challenge for sure.
Well, and there was this whole narrative about you that was going on amongst the fans about needing to be freed and that kind of thing. And you mentioned in the book that this was actually a harmful narrative, regardless of what their intentions were. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so there was a movement that I think that the people who started it really wanted the best for me, which I think is sweet. And I talk more about this in the book, but at the same time, I think as a young kid, you have so much pressure on you for what you think everybody wants you to be, what decisions they want you to make. They're rooting for you to make specific life choices. And that can put a lot of pressure on anyone, but especially in those formative years as a young teen, you know that that's there. But for me, thankfully, like, I think just the older I get, like I look back at that and say, okay, I can see their perspective. They wanted me to throw off all restraints, to leave the faith altogether, which is just not my story today. Even I know some people may be bothered by that I would separate the lies and the error from the truth of what I see today. And yet that's where I am. And that's where my story is. And I'm really grateful for that. And so in this book, I just tell those wrestlings of like, this is what everybody wanted. And here's what I was struggling with behind the scenes that no one saw.
Yeah, becoming your own person.
Right.
And do you look back on your years on television and regret having been put in that position, or is it more something that you've embraced?
It's interesting. I look at that time and I'll say that as someone who sees that God uses everything for a reason, I look at that and say, oh, that was God's plan. So I don't look back and regret everything. Yes, there were challenges. I think the older you get, the more you realize that it was an interesting place to be as a young kid. But the opportunities that it opened up were amazing. And I really appreciated all the travels that we got to do, and the crew. They're like family still today. And so I'm grateful for all of those experiences. And I think I can only look to the future and come out stronger because of it and learn and grow. So that's how I look at it. I look at it as something that I can look back on and learn from.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and getting very real and raw about growing up and about your life so far, how has that affected your relationship with your other family members? Have they been supportive of this, or is it more like you're doing this for yourself kind of thing?
Well, from the beginning, I sought to share some of my journey with my family and just how I came to the conclusions that I did and why I changed in different aspects that may seem more big and drastic for those still in that community. And I think that at some point you just agree to disagree, because if you have differences, it's like, okay, they want the best for me. So you can see, okay, you're in that place. That's how you see the word of God in the Bible now, as opposed to what I was raised with. And so I think it's been good to have those conversations. And although like some of my family is still in these teachings, I'm really grateful that I still have relationships with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Have they gotten to read the book yet, or parts of the book?
So I shared parts of the book with some of them, and I got some good feedback from some of my family. And so I was grateful for that. And then others will just read it soon enough whenever I get more hard copies in.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and obviously it's been a tough couple of years for your family going through your brother's court situation, that kind of thing. What has it been like for you going through this difficult personal journey, having all of the people watching you and your family, and then deciding to open up about that?
Yeah, it's been tough. It's definitely something that's super difficult to talk about. And with all that has transpired in the past few years, I think it's just another difficult thing that when anybody walks through a challenge in life, it's hard enough. But then doing that in the public eye is next level, and it's challenging. And so, but I will speak to like just my brother's situation. It's so heartbreaking, and my heart just really breaks for the victims. And Like, I'm grateful for the justice system that is in place. And so, yeah, it's just been such a difficult time for my entire family. But just speaking for myself, um, I'm grateful for the justice that is being served at this time.
Yeah. And how has it been for you to move forward from there? Have you been able to, or is there still part of you that's stuck in that?
I think that every day, it can be tough to, like, if you stop and think about it, it's really hard. It still is painful because anytime there are family things like that, it just really um it's hard, it's just hard. So um I am grateful, though, that I just lean in harder to God and um turn to my faith in him, and that's what gives me the strength to move forward every day.
Yeah, and you're putting out this book. This is a wonderful book that I'm sure so many people are going to read. What do you want people who pick up the book and read it, who maybe know parts of your story, what do you want them to take away from your book?
Yeah, I think that my heart in all of this has been from the start. I do not like conflict. I don't like to ruffle any feathers, but I know that my heart has been to write this book, to share my story, even as hard as it is some days, because I know in the end, if it helps one person, then it's worth it. And so I want the reader to come away at the end seeing that, in spite of what you may have been taught, if you were following a teacher who claimed to speak for God but didn't, that there is still hope for you. And you don't have to abandon your faith, but you can cling to God himself and not trust in a person. And the word of God is unchanging. And so that's what I hold to as my hope. And I hope that those who are harmed by these teachers will realize that they can move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, finally, before I let you go, how would you describe your relationship with God today versus when you were younger and in these teachings?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's definitely different because I thought of God as somebody who was always out to get me and always out to make my life miserable if I stepped outside of an unknown box. And that's just not how God operates. My relationship with him today is amazing because I know that I am perfectly made whole through Jesus and I don't have to perform. It's not about these outward standards that I'm keeping up. It's about having a relationship with God through Jesus. And that's the beauty of it. It brings freedom because you're not terrified in fear that he's out to get you at every turn.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for talking with us, for being so open. And I can't wait for everyone to read your book, Becoming Free Indeed.